Hello, dear viewer. Do you enjoy listening to thoughtful essays about art or video games or any other media that we have just rolling around in our heads? My name is Lindy, and I'm an artist who loves to write about what I see and how it affects me, how it affects you, and how it affects all of us as we consume it. If you want to grow smarter and consider some of these curiosities with me, I invite you to stick around. Grab a cup of something delicious and let me chat with you about what I'm thinking about. All to say, I'm glad you're here, and without further ado, let's jump into a new video essay. Greeting us like an old friend, yet still coming back with something new to dive into within the confines of an island of paradise, there is Animal Crossing: New Horizons, awaiting our return and our gameplay. This game continues to engage and endear itself to users both old and new to the Nintendo platform. A game with task-centered work and minimal updates, simple characters, and an entire lack of consistent storyline. This begs the question, how and why has this game succeeded the test of time? Per Nintendo, it still remains a bestseller, even 5 years following its release. With its surge in popularity due to the pandemic of 2020, Animal Crossing: New Horizons was a friendly embrace in the form of an experience for gamers all around the world, and it maintains its star status as one of the best games released for the Nintendo Switch platform. This game offers a unique and personalized experience, one which has been proven to have a profound effect upon gamers, and it continues to stand the test of time. Let's discuss what makes this game process and involvement so compelling for such a broad audience, and go into the further implications and research describing both the merit as well as the importance of this game to us as gamers and other non-gamers alike. Our discussion today will start with art theory and principle, transitioning to art history, then going on to analysis, and closing with research and final conclusions. Together, let's discover the beauty and the implications behind why Animal Crossing: New Horizons just works. In this game, the world building and visuals are inextricably linked to make for a universe that is inviting over and over again. The visual components chosen by the designers and artists make for a world that is aware of its limitations, and yet somehow it is even more lovable because of those very boundaries of the world development, as well as its compelling visual story. First, let's examine selected art elements to work through the visual development and effects of the game. In today's discussion, we will use the following art elements to talk about Animal Crossing: New Horizons: shape, space, and color. Beginning with shape, we will discuss the use of various shape language to make a world of characters and their various details in the game. When examining shape language, we are talking about the geometric shapes which are chosen to build characters, items, and various other details of an artwork or piece. Think about if you chose to illustrate a building for a character from your imagination, using a square or rectangle versus perhaps a circle, and the type of messaging that you might learn from that artistic choice about that character. What if you chose further shapes to accentuate more parts of that character's personality? Shape language creates a good storyline or a narrative around a character, an art piece, or a message, leading for further connection with their viewers and audience. Now that we have established what shape language is and how it connects to character design and various art, let's look at two characters in specific to compare and contrast their various designs and glean more from their shape language to appreciate the intricacies of their designs. Isabelle is a Shih Tzu dog that joins the island of Animal Crossing: New Horizons in the stead of Island Secretary, working together with Tom Nook, our Raccoon Island resident services manager and lone-driven businessman. Looking at Shih Tzu dogs as reference, we can see that there are several directions the artists could have taken when creating Isabelle's character as a dog. And examining the shapes which they chose to construct her instead, we can conclude that they are spot on in defining her character as approachable, friendly, and buoyant. Isabelle's face is a rounded square, suggesting an evenly placed and easily palatable expression for us to read. Her eyes are long ovals with slight lines across the top, almost bringing in a manga-style eye and combining her eyebrows with the eyes themselves. The shape of her nose, a wide oblong oval, echoes the soft ovals of blush in her cheeks, again creating a sense of repeated shape and symmetry. Instead of a larger or protruding snout, Isabel's light-colored snout is in the shape of a soft, rounded spade around her mouth, ending in a point that brings us back to her eyes, while her hairstyle is large and poofy, also ending in a similar point that draws us back to her face. The only mention of a triangular shape in her character design is in her tail, which we see has a very clear end point. This one component makes her feel orderly and tidy, and is the only clear angular point she has, which fits well into her character design, as it suggests the essential component of a dog, a tail. And the curve leading up to it almost suggests yet another oval or circle to her shape. The roundness and curves, which create her 3D figure, make for an adorably stocky figure, which looks fluffy and squishy. Her design and expressions are easy to decipher, and these design choices and her shape language make for an effective character model. In contrast, let's examine another character who embodies some qualities of canines, the cunning fox that visits your island, Red. Red is an art vendor who appears around the island in a ship along various coastlines surrounding the isle. And ironically, it is Isabel who forewarns you and the island residents of his presence, and to avoid doing business with him. There is much lore and additional history and details which surround Red, but for our discussion today, we will simply touch upon these and then go on to examine how his character design via shape language serves to underscore his personality and role in the game. What is curious about Red is that we meet him not first by way of walking into a building and locating him there, as we do with Isabel, but we are introduced to him first via his boat. Although it naturally has curves, as all boats and vessels do, the scale and clear angles which are used to construct the boat out of shapes make it stand out and feel amiss when in comparison to the other orderly buildings on the island or the round, welcoming shapes of plants and trees. A jagged rectangular piece of wood leads up to the boat, almost hearkening to the image of a pirate ship plank, and the squares, rectangles, and trapezoids which model his boat feel blocky and clunky and out of order with the other architecture we've observed previously. Though there is smoke which comes from a plume atop his vessel and it is round, its hue of deep gray to black and the irregularity of the circle sizes and number feel a little too odd to be comforting. When we finally do encounter Red and enter into his ship, we see that the place is dimly lit with bulky furniture, knickknacks, and paintings, and Red stands out just enough with his burnt orange fur. We begin talking to him, engaging as we get a closer look, greeted by this new rendition of a character in the game, but one that feels markedly different in his shape language rather than Isabel or Tom Nook. Red's face is more of an elongated, irregular quadrilateral with rounded sides, leading up to two isosceles triangles perched atop of his head. His eyes are chunky, thick lines that point in at an angle, guiding us back to the snout, which clearly protrudes out in an upturned cone. Already, it feels like the shapes and the forms are a bit at odds with one another, moving in different directions and toying with proportion, size, and relative placement to the figure's face. Moving down to his stomach and torso, we see another oval, but it is broken up by a rectangular apron. Seeing his torso so interrupted by such an angular shape feels disconnected somehow to the figure, and it makes us wonder why that rectangle would be there, or if he could be a suspicious character diverting our attention to his apron rather than to himself. His tail ends in two rounded off points, perhaps suggesting fluffiness, but the tail shapes are irregular. Red is not as easy to decipher as others might be, and that there is something about him that simply feels out of place or off. Seeing as Red fills a role of an art dealer and suggested con artist, his form helps to further suggest that he is an elusive character, and being around him can feel like being cornered. Red has a lore which connects back to foxes and even kitsune figures in Japanese mythology, and this collectively adds more of a detailed elusiveness and trickiness to his character. Notably, Red's design still embodies the rounded edges mentioned earlier with Isabel's character design. His character's appearance must match the limitations of shape language that are set by the overall confines of Animal Crossing New Horizons. However, due to the clever and subtle details and shapes used to create Red's figure, we know now to associate red not as being necessarily a danger in the gameplay, but as a personality that could be hard to deal with, strange, and even one that could raise skepticism as we consider him against the other cast of characters that we have gotten to know. As a closing note regarding shape language used in Animal Crossing: New Horizons, we observe in the designs of characters as well as in the world building itself, down to the very details, that there are rounded corners and curves and rounded sides to most items that we encounter and use in the gameplay. Even the trees and bushes, the seashore and the water, many of these details echo back a continuous sense of roundness or circular shapes. Circles can often imbue welcoming or friendly characters. Circles are a perfect shape in mathematics, and they are often used in symbols or designs representing parts joined to form a whole, or an internal sense of unity. Further, circular shape language underscores that the underlying textures and associations we make about a character are then connected to those items and components that are curved, thinking about things that are smooth to the touch, easy to see, symmetrical in their balance, and therefore likely friendly, welcoming, easy to process, harmless, soft, smooth, etc. The shape language here affords us an unspoken atmosphere to the game, implying that the rounded corners we encounter so often and these softened edges of characters in themselves make for a world that is approachable, calming overall, and complete. The only items or details which break this convention and they add to a very thoughtful artistic touch and realistic connection to the game are items or tools, animals, buildings, or objects which are meant to represent their realistic counterparts. Shovels, axes, fishing poles, and the like, rare butterflies and squids, all share a much more realistic portrayal, and they abandon the rules of round-shaped language used previously. There are many approaches and ideas surrounding why this component remains in the gameplay, and so I'll offer mine to the discussion. This game wants to mirror reality only so far as to where it is highly simulative and suggestive of real life on the Isle. We use real shovels, we build real-looking pathways and bridges, we are bitten by real bugs, and we pick up real sea urchins. We learn more about how these tools function and how animals behave as we encounter more and more events such as this in the game. And when we do encounter or engage with these details or experiences, we're reminded visually yet again of where we are. Our lives are meant to copy from reality, but they copy from reality in a copacetic manner, so as to remind us that our life on the island is a simulation, but it is one which is based in reality. It is interesting, it is detailed, it is engaging, it's fun. And this reality is housed in comfort, approachability, and a softened visual presentation. Moving onwards, we will now discuss the use of space as an artistic element in Animal Crossing: New Horizons. When discussing space, this topic can feel a bit amorphous or confusing when painted onto an interactive video game-based artistic experience. To discuss this concept in further detail, I will be referencing and quoting from an article written by Stanislav Stankovic in the bibliography below. Stankovic outlines the various ideas and design choices which are crucial to a conceptualization of space in video game creation. And to better bring this specific analysis into our discussion, let us first then conceptualize what space is. Space, with regard to video game experience, looks more at the idea of two-dimensional space versus three-dimensional space, and how the physics underpinning the video game world building then define how that space is presented and used throughout your experience. In games such as Cuphead or Spiritfarer, we see an intentional use of 2D space as an art element, and this makes for a cartoon reminiscent presentation of the game and its gameplay. It presents its own limitations to the user, and that defines how the user then interacts within the game, both its simplicity as well as through its various setbacks. Contrastingly, in games such as Mario Kart, we see the use of three-dimensional space. These games afford us a more realistic and immersive feeling to the worlds we play throughout. And in my personal experience, they tend to induce more shock value, either by way of realistic feeling cutscenes or through genuine scares via a three-dimensional immersive feeling. Yet another level to this type of three-dimensional gameplay via space composition is how movement and physics are treated. Interestingly, Stankovic makes the point that traditional lateral movement and conceptualization of gravity as we know it are challenged in games such as Portal. These games push users to think in new ways. The movements there, the physics, and the gameplay are in direct contrast at times to what we know is familiar in our realistic settings, perhaps making the game then more engaging, and quite literally, an idea to turn around in our heads and then somehow wrap our heads around. Stankovic says the following regarding video game constraints, which I believe then guide the choices of space and therein the defined movements within it for a successful video game. Quote, "Constraints are a powerful element of game design. They often serve to focus and channel the gameplay in particular patterns. Limiting a player's freedom of motion can be an essential tool for driving the narrative and action of a game. The entire art of level design revolves around this." I concur with Stankovic, as restrictions are what make video games so memorable and so great as an art form. When restrictions are clear, we know what to expect and experience as game players, and we are offered different types of video game events and gameplay, which then afford us a broad variety of gaming to enjoy by ourselves or with others. With this in mind, we can then consider and speculate regarding the created gameplay of Animal Crossing: New Horizons and its various effects on the user experience as a result of its own constraints. The game allows users to move up and down on a predetermined X and Y axis. However, we find in the gameplay that there is one crucial limitation, and that is viewpoint. We are forced to look down upon our Animal Crossing's avatar and the various characters and environments we find ourselves in. The closest we can reach to having a more ground floor, first-person perspective is when we take photographs or are sitting down or standing in certain positions, which allow us to then tilt the camera and be on eye level with our avatar and the cast of the game. The X and Y axis criterion reminds me of the older Legend of Zelda series in that it, too, uses the same approach of X and Y axis navigation. What this means in both games is that the gameplay engineers and designers are forcing the player into a chosen perspective. Instead of being able to adopt a first-person perspective, as we are able to do in other games, we are forced to remain in the third. There are, of course, speculations to this, and my analysis is the following. We are not allowed to use a first-person perspective, as that would be too immersive and it does not suit the aims of the game itself. First-person perspectives are often used in games wherein we are asked to empathize with the main character, for example, often playing with them through a storyline. By direct contrast, Animal Crossing asks us to use the third perspective, which is not as immersive, and it places us in a position of autonomy in the game as the player. We are then able to observe all of the changes we enact upon the world quite directly as we build there. We are given permission in this role to change and interact with the world as we want or need to. With relation to 3D space, space and physics perform as expected in this design, aligning with the idea of a mirrored reality. Curiously, we are confined by the pre-assigned island dimensions and seascape where the ocean ends. There is a clear predetermined X and Y coordinate point placed within the gameplay that we cannot exceed. This causes us to stop searching outwards for more and more new experiences, instead turning inwards to our island lives. We look for other items or characters seeking our attention. We are gently nudged to focus more on the type of town, island, and largely the life that we are building in the game. Still, we are granted and encouraged to play with the spacing of the island, with everything from pathways and ladders to cutting down trees or enlarging other houses. Some buildings and features are barred from that self-autonomous editing, and others we can edit and change, but we must work together with the characters in order to see that change reflected. With such agency, we become a form of a game designer in a sense within ourselves, changing and editing the island and its components as we see fit, to make the space and place where we and our residents want to return to. It is interactive art. There are incredible and inspiring examples of gamers launching their creativity and their analytical skills to the test on such a blank canvas of Animal Crossing. If you want to be in awe or simply applaud their work, I encourage you to check out many of the amazing users who do so. Finally, the last note to share regarding space as it is applied here in Animal Crossing: New Horizons connects us back to a sacred and historical form of organizing space stemming from ancient China, feng shui. The Happy Home Academy regularly scores a player's house throughout the Animal Crossing experience. What is little known about this feature of the gameplay is that it is a point system, and it is not random or merely due to chance how the player is rewarded. No. This feature of the gameplay connects back again to a player's use of three-dimensional space. In this regard, there are several features which allow a player to earn points and increase their score with the Happy Home Academy, and one such way is following the conventions of feng shui. For some quick context, feng shui is a traditional form of geomancy that originated in ancient China and claims to use energy and forces to harmonize an individual with their surrounding environment. In my experience, feng shui is often associated nowadays in a more Western context with interior design hacks or organizational tips which can help rooms and spaces feel more natural, tidy, and that they have the ability to both be an individualized space as well as conform to a unified flow or connectivity from room to room and space to space. Again, there are many wonderful resources and creators who discuss this topic, and I encourage you to check them out. Thinking about this connection to the game, we can bring in an understanding then that the way that we organize our furniture, our rooms, and our objects obtained throughout our lives on the island matter much more than we might have previously considered. The Happy Home Academy reminds us that the way that we treat our spaces and the way that we interact within them and with each other as well as with ourselves matter. What's more, when characters do come to visit your home, they will generate commentary about how your home is arranged, and they'll remark upon what they like and what they don't. In closing, through this gameplay and with its various restrictions within a predefined space, we learn how we create and honor spaces, and we learn that this matters. We consider what changes we could or should make to better the lives of ourselves as well as the villagers of the island, and we learn that the changes we do make will have a real-life benefit or consequence. Defined by being only able to adventure to a certain endpoint and through a certain perspective, the game asks for us to reflect more upon the world that we are actively building for ourselves, as well as for the villagers who live on the island shores. Bringing the focus back to within, we are introspective then regarding our experiences as we engineer them, and we co-create the game together within the world-building restraints which have been laid out before us with our community and a life which we have built. In closing, let's now move on to our final discussion to highlight yet one more intricacy of the beauty of Animal Crossing New Horizons. Specifically, we will examine the art element of color. To better discuss this final art element, let us first consider the psychology of color. We can agree that colors have an effect upon us, be it large or small. Some colors in a design or an object go unnoticed. Meanwhile, other colors and design choices remain noticeable, striking, and they demand for us to remember them for a myriad of reasons. Color schemes and thoughtful color choices define how we understand an environment, for example, like seeing white walls on a children's floor of a hospital or bright, colorful ones. Each design choice imprints upon us our impressions of a place or an event in our memory. And being thoughtful in such choices can make or break how successful an artwork, a living space, or an event could be. Further adding to the element of color and the subcomponent of color psychology, let's now bring in a perspective for color theory vis-a-vis color schemes. As a reminder, there are many different types of color schemes, ranging from monochromatic, what most people are familiar with, a single hue defining an entire color scheme, and complementary, when colors sit across from one another on the color wheel. There are actually many more beyond these initial two types, and we'll use some of these little-known schemes to identify certain details and design components in New Horizons. While there are many different color schemes present throughout the game, we'll focus on the environmental color schemes via the role of nature on the island and in the gameplay. The seasons changing in Animal Crossing New Horizons are pleasant and exciting moments in the gameplay, marked by changes in the environment and, specifically, color. Personally, I find this feature a strength in the gameplay experience, as it continues to make the game feel novel, interesting, and inviting. As time passes in the real world, so too does it continue to move on in the game. The regularity of this and how it changes small interactions and events within the gameplay is incredibly intentional. The various seasons each have their own color schemes, which make them feel cohesive and, in a sense, very real to us as we interact within them in a new environment, a dynamic one. Examining the seasons of spring and fall as partner seasons in specific, we can see the clear color schemes portrayed throughout each time of year in the game's design, which provides a sense of reality, and they allow for versatile experiences in the gameplay per the nature on the isle. Spring is characterized visually through the game by various trees blooming, including some trees shedding cherry blossoms, a soft sight to behold as the petals float through the wind on the shore and coast. Knowing that the season does not last long, characters will then run around catching petals or sharing DIY recipes so as to take advantage of the time. Similar to real life, certain activities and events are then connected to nature, and they are only available when the time and weather permits. Speaking to the colors used themselves, we observe many pastel hues, which are employed throughout the landscape to create soft, bright, and refreshing palettes which share internal harmony. These pastel-based color schemes employ both monochromatic and analogous color schemes, as well as split complementary. The monochromatic color scheme can be seen in how the cherry trees or sakura are in bloom and grow throughout the island. The petals are soft off-white, which leans towards a pink hue, and their shading throughout uses various forms of pink in different saturation, tint, and value. Altogether, it makes the trees simply beautiful to look at and easy to decipher, with these slightly changing gradients in color resembling the depth of the tree and the real world as how we often see objects with the naked eye in forms of reflected light. Taking the springtime egg hunting and egg season into account, the decorations and events on the island in this time of year certainly celebrate and take those color schemes further. In specific, looking at the eggs used to detail the island for the springtime, we can observe not only complementary color schemes here, such as purple and yellow, which are accenting one another and acting as opposite colors in a sense, but also split complementary schemes. Animal Crossing New Horizons introduces a spring to us that is reminiscent of what its real counterpart would be. The colors are pastel because they seem to almost suggest that they have only just returned from the wintertime and are regaining their vibrancy. Soon-to-be pastel pinks will then fade away into verdant landscapes and lush greens. Overall, instead of being overly repetitive, patterns such as these create exciting and much more intriguing environments. By contrast, when we do go on to observe fall, we can see a marked shift from the pastels of spring and the saturated hues of summer to a much more homogeneous overtone of warm sienna, amber, and orange hues, which are used to visually represent autumn's arrival on the island. The trees begin by changing slowly using gradients, visually guiding us gameplay by gameplay through the fall season from soft browns and beiges to saturated oranges and reds. The steady use of such colors invokes a sense of captured change to the viewer, with us able to step in and observe both the small differences in day-to-day gameplay, eventually arriving at an autumnal landscape with our neighborhood. As you might have already surmised, the color scheme at work here is indeed an analogous one. Analogous colors are colors which touch each other along the color wheel, and again, in mimicking nature, the developers have opted for a more natural approach in illustrating a fall landscape. To add to the fun and the details of the season, there are inclusions of holidays and other autumn celebrations. One such is Halloween. The use of purple and orange as partner secondary colors, the secondary colors again being green, orange, and purple, creates an interesting visual addition to the characters and the landscape. It feels vibrant and spooky and exciting to see such starkly saturated values in contrast to the browns mentioned earlier. So why does all of this matter then? Other than creating a gameplay experience that is highly predictable, these intricacies, details, and other visual designs help us to feel more immersed in the game, interested in what we do, and in part then more present and involved. Not only do the seasons change, but the game changes as well. The events we experience shift, and we are given opportunities to participate in the seasons and invest in our gameplay and characters. The overall effect brings us back as players in connection with the game, even if we are not actively playing it in the moment, as we can consider how our lives on the island are visually connected to the worlds that we experience every day. Now that we have thoroughly worked through only 3 of the art elements and analyzed their thorough impact in New Horizons, to close our discussion regarding art theory, let's now examine what these elements do as they culminate and combine in our gaming experience. Thanks to the visual design and methodical creation of New Horizons, the art principle of harmony here solidifies the experience of the gamer and establishes the general atmosphere and experience that a player can expect from Animal Crossing. Harmony as an art principle simply refers back to the sense of unity, wholeness, or cohesiveness, which is achieved in an artwork. Balance is present, as well as a sense of belonging to an idea or a theme, which is present in the entire piece. And this can be found in historical art, as well as in the media we consume today. Because the art elements of shape, space, and color are applied so methodically to the creation and maintenance of Animal Crossing New Horizons, we instantly recognize the game when we see it played. We know the type of atmosphere, soothing, inviting, which we will be greeted with each time we play, and the game appeals to us through these elements combining to create a sense of hominess and familiarity. With the soft forms and round-shaped language, the measured use of spacing, movement, and timing, and the ever-changing color palettes, the game retains a sense of interest, discovery, and yet a welcome normalcy in our day-to-day media consumption. An invited pause from the busy pace of the world, New Horizons and its design creates a harmonious space in which all of the characters, events, and elements belong, and they await our return with some intriguing change, but largely and welcomely just the way that we left them. For this discussion, I will be referencing a video by the Art Institute of Chicago and another by Smart History via Khan Academy, both listed in the Informal bibliography below. First, let's step back to a time in the late 1800s to an art movement which followed the Impressionists, a style you might have heard of, to a style instead which was originally coined as divisionism, pointillism, as you're likely to have heard it called. And this offered a fresh new perspective on color theory and painting as an entire art form, as it placed science, and specifically an understanding of vision and light, at the center of the technique. The painter Georges Seurat once said of his works in this style, "Some people say that they see poetry in my paintings. I see only science." What is happening beneath the surface of his most famous painting, Sunday Afternoon on the island of Le Grand Chat, harnesses this understanding of how our eyes and optical processing functions work to internalize and interpret color in our environment. Put simply, Seurat dove into a technique that was time and labor intensive, placing tiny dots of color, often complementary colors, next to one another, almost creating a vibrating effect, making different impressions of hues, shadows, and figures, all the while relying on the eye and the brain to then read the different hues placed alongside one another, and then process and generate the color depth that he was trying to portray. Impressive and calculated, this technique coined Neo-Impressionism, and Seurat used this to study and portray the French upper class in this painting, along with other themes he later took on. To speak to the visuals and themes of this painting itself, we see a sense of upper class or leisure class people, but as historians have noted, that the classes here are beginning to mix and they are not as discernible as they might formerly have been. Further, the colors are bright but not overly powerful, suggesting a calm atmosphere. There are clear lines, forms, and figures, something in direct contrast to the Impressionist movement from before. Lastly, some figures and storytelling here is left enigmatic, and overall the grouping of people feel like they are together enjoying the afternoon, yes. However, they do feel somehow disconnected, like Seurat is simply marveling at the space and time and asking us to do the same. How does this then connect to Animal Crossing New Horizons? Taking historical art or media and placing it alongside what we consume today is interesting and also explanatory of why some images work very effectively. Many of us have grown up seeing this image or excerpts of this image, and taking this image then to juxtapose it with this cover can help us understand why the cover works so well. Because this painting has been so calmly ubiquitous in our collective memory of art, history, and media, as it has been circled and recycled over many, many years, it is then intriguing to examine closer the cover of New Horizons to draw out what is calling upon the aesthetics of Le Grand Chat. Both pieces of art use highly precise dot work to create their images, in a sense. Seurat and his pointillism, of course, and the visual developers of New Horizons using gradients, digital color theory, and of course, the many pixels and programs connected to making convincing, smooth, and well-textured gameplay for players. Both artworks also lean into using brighter colors, with Animal Crossing leaping into much more densely saturated colors for characters and other elements. The bright colors and composition of these characters leading us into the background visually make for an interesting and inviting art piece that gives us direction of where to look, inviting us to examine and get lost in what we see, similar to Seurat's painting. Seurat's painting, however, carries with it such a disjointedness that we cannot ignore it. The people are all gathered next to the water, and yet they somehow feel apart. They are aware of their own presence in the park, but they seem hardly invested or aware of that of other people. By direct contrast, the characters pictured in Animal Crossing are not static, and they are performing actions with one another in a way that feels friendly and intriguing to observe. While Seurat is introducing us to a group of people who feel quite individualistic, New Horizons shows us a neighborhood of characters who are all involved in one another's lives. Both artworks are beautiful and effective. New Horizons has taken the motif to a new level, one which has illustrated a friendly and inviting observation of gameplay and invites that player in. The other, Seurat's painting, meanwhile, shares a beautifully sunny day along the water as well, but one which feels much less attached, albeit beautiful to observe. Overall, as Seurat's piece is so ingrained in our collective cultural memory and the visual elements work very effectively, taking these motifs then from that painting to New Horizons helps us see why this cover is so effective, compelling, and enticing to inspect. As we analyze this game and its success years after its release, garnering some insight regarding why the game did so particularly well and remains so effective, we can walk down some different avenues to then examine this. Paraphrasing key points from an article published by Lin Zhu, she argues via research and her own personal sentiments that the game was perfectly poised in 2020 due to the pandemic, as it was a place to create, quote, a shelter for players to escape to and be in a community. Such a space to exist in was comforting and remains so today, with Statista citing that since the release, there have been about 48 million units of this game sold. It remains as the second highest selling game for the Switch platform, and due to the aforementioned visual components and more, I find that this game maintains a well-earned success. Looking at the game via Maslow's hierarchy of needs, an interesting angle to take via researchers Bentley and Stratman, note that the game cleverly addresses each area of the pyramid, which could then explain from an analytical standpoint why playing this game because of this framework creates the effects on the player it has. The physical needs of ourselves in the game need to be met via food and shelter, of course, although food is more of a boost rather than a necessity. Creating a shelter is made attainable quickly, and we are set to begin a basic lifestyle on the island. The sense of hectic rush to obtain items or tend to each need has already been accounted for. Further, the safety needs are addressed as well, as the game does not introduce any enemies to fight or flee from. Instead, the worst things that could happen to a player that address a player's safety are bug-induced injuries or problems in the ocean. Safety doesn't need to be a concern when playing, as it is a reliable space that is inherently safe, and so the effective filter or the anxiety level of players inherently goes down. There are love, esteem, cognitive, and aesthetic needs which the game also addresses as well. The virtual characters we interact with actively ask about us and they invest into our well-being. They remember us. As we capture bugs or fish or snag art pieces, we learn more about each of these items and build our cognition through the gameplay. We are then to be surrounded by an island of our own predilection and choosing, granted agency in that design. The self-actualization piece of the pyramid is available for players to attain as well through pushing themselves to reach goals which they create or are set. With all these guidelines and gameplay motifs in place, it is then no surprise to say that New Horizons has earned its reputation as being a relaxing staple in any Nintendo player's repertoire. Lastly, some players have cited this game as being an important social and community space for marginalized communities. According to an article by Paul Abustan, they found that New Horizons offered a comfy and cozy community to exist within, housing their multiple identities and intersections of those identities. Being a part of a community, society, and neighborhood that is inherently safe and welcoming was important for them to find rest, comfort, connection, and joy. This game offers a neighborhood and an island which we design and we create, and then share with others via the in-game characters or online. This gameplay of sharing is so essential to the functions of the island and the backbone of the game, and players quite literally do get out of the game what they do choose to invest in it. Gifted with only one island and one save file, players are then invited on an extremely intentional and engagingly friendly life to participate in within New Horizons. In our chaotic world, Animal Crossing New Horizons provides a safe haven and place to rest, and its visual designs are not only effective, they are meaningful, adorable, and lasting. The harmony and agency with which we are granted to play with in such a universe is special, and we co-create along with the characters and various other circumstances of the game a life that is uniquely our own. A sincere and heartfelt thank you for watching this video. Thank you so much. I hope that you enjoyed listening to this lecture-style essay. It was a joy to undertake this project, as this game does mean a lot to me, and I know it means a lot to many of you watching. And as always, thank you for supporting me. It means a lot to me that you enjoy what I'm creating and how I'm applying my analysis and training to new topics. If you want to support me, there are several great ways, big and small. You can like and comment on this video if you liked it, as we both know that it assists with the algorithm and so on. If you truly enjoy my droning, I'm kidding, my thoughtful analysis of topics, or if you want to drop in and check out my art journals or illustrations or anything else I'm up to, I'd always be grateful for your subscription and just stopping by. Lastly, I'm finally operating my Etsy store now, and it would be such a treat to send you a postcard or a print if you feel like there's something there which suits your fancy. Wishing you a wonderful day ahead, and I hope that you feel validated. I hope you feel smarter and like you got to unwind and relax as you learn something new. Go enjoy art so you can enjoy more of your life. I am Lindy's Colors.